Hello there, PerfectDraft users. So, just doing a quick video today on the data that's been sent back from the PerfectDraft Pro and how fast the cooling is, for example, because it's all included in there. And this shows you a little graph of the data that goes back to the AB InBev cloud. I'm not going to tell you where it's stored. I know that, quite easy to find out for yourselves, to be fair, but I extracted that data out of the internet connected board that's in these machines as it goes to the cloud, and then I've graphed it, and you can sort of see here, this is what we've got 4 sensors here. It does have more in the machine. It sends all sorts of stuff up to them, things like fan information. The fans all run on PWM. It sends various temperatures. It's got a few sensors in there. It's got the cabinet temperature, it's got a keg temperature, it's got an ambient temperature, and you can see in this graph we've got those plus a reject heatsink temperature. So essentially it's got a whopping big heatsink in the back of the machine and a couple of fans on there which are obviously getting the hot air off of that, so they're trying to get the air away from that heatsink. And then you've got another fan in the machine that's then sending cold air in and around the machine, and that goes around the keg, cools all the keg down, which is always great. So I'm in the UK, you can probably tell by the accent, to be fair, but in the UK and Europe we use a metal keg, so we use the metal 6-litre kegs. And then in America, I think this is launched in like America, Mexico, maybe Brazil, can't quite remember the exact countries, but they have a plastic keg. So some of these plastic kegs, it might mean that they cool down quicker, like the Blade, because obviously the Blade uses a plastic keg, the Sub uses a plastic keg. It's PerfectDraft on the AB InBev side, because Sub and Blade are Heineken. That's why you see the Heineken owned beers on those, and the PerfectDraft is AB InBev. So that's why you sort of see their beers on this machine, although you are starting to see some sort of beers arriving on PerfectDraft which are not from their portfolio. So that's always good for choice, isn't it? It's mega. I've got to admit, I tried the, what is it called? The Orchard Pig cider this weekend, out of a bottle. Yeah, it's really nice, actually. I'm not usually a cider fan. I know when I had the Apfel Rauber on the Blade, or the Orchard Thieves, or whatever it's called, my jaw wanted to go for a little dance on its own, because it was that sweet. It literally popped out of its socket. But yeah, the Orchard Pig's really good and really nice on a warm day. But anyway, back to the temperature. So we have got here on this graph, this is all the data coming from the machine. If I just flick Windows very briefly, this is some of the data that comes from the machine up to the PerfectDraft cloud. That's what I'm going to call it. I'm not going to reference it by the other names. So it sends data up every 5 minutes or so. You can see that on the graph behind, on the data behind the graph. About every 5 minutes it sends a heartbeat up, and that's got various information in there for various temperatures. And then I've taken that's what you see here. So yesterday I had a keg that was at 25 Celsius in our garage. It was frigging boiling. And then I put that in the machine. The machine had been sort of left with the door wide open, so it was essentially behaving as a brand new machine. So when you first turn these things on, they have what's called the red snake, and what it's doing is it's basically calibrating the temperature sensor. So it's got when it works out the keg temps, so this is the cabinet temp, you can see. So when I shut that door, it was 17.5 degrees inside the machine, and then the beer took nearly an hour. So what are we at there? Look, 236 from 140, so 50 minutes. So it took 50 minutes for the red snake to complete, and then we started getting these keg temperatures, the beer temperature that started to read. So that started off 13.2 after it'd been in there for an hour. The cabinet temps were 17.5 when I shut the door. So in the first hour, it dropped the cabinet temp by 4 Celsius. So it came down pretty quick on that initial bit. And then it took it 10 hours to cool it from the 12.9 degrees down to 3 degrees. So that's 11:20 last night. So it's what it's doing there, to be honest, about a degree an hour, which isn't that fast. But there are some issues with the current firmware versions. I did have a dodgy machine as well before this Pro, because I had 2 beta machines, and now I've had 2 retail machines. I think it's 2. It's 2 or 3. I think it's 2. Can't quite remember now. I've lost track. But yeah, one of them had a really weird fault where it was just really bad at cooling. It used shed loads of power. It used more power than the normal PerfectDraft Pro. So yeah, that's dropping at 1 degree an hour, isn't it? Once it's got to that point, the first bit. Although saying that, if it was up at 25, the quickest cooling is that initial bit, the first hour, and then it's just taking its time to come down. The data does suggest that there might be a boost mode, because essentially at the minute they've tried to keep a balance of quick cooling and low noise. So the machine, the fans are sort of driven by PWM. So that means, if you're not techie, that means they can change the speed of the fans on demand. So at the minute they're at 30% load. So they're at 30% load at the minute. They did used to run faster and louder and noisier, and obviously the louder and faster they get, the less they're going to live. The lifespan will drop a bit. But to be fair, no one really knows yet what the lifespan of these machines is going to be, because they're only, well, the beta users got them back end of last year. They went to retail a few weeks ago. I think there's another batch out today, possibly. Not sure, because there's been yodel issues today with Beerhawk, so it might be that delays it a little bit. But we'll see. Time will tell, eh? Time will tell. So yeah, 10 degrees from there, so went from 12.9 at 236. At 11.26 we're down to 3. So yeah, it took its time getting down there. And then you can see basically the cabinet temperature starts to fluctuate. So that's as it's turning the cooler on and off. You can see that's getting backed up in the ambient temperatures, going up and down when the cooler's off. So you can see they go up together. The heatsink, so the heatsink cools. So you can see it was on for ages. It maxes out around 40 Celsius. And then as the cooler's turned off, that thing then cools itself down. Went down to 20 Celsius, nearly ambient. And then the demand came back in. It's like your central heating, really, isn't it? When your thermostat's calling for heat, turns your central heating on. On the PerfectDraft Pro, when your keg temp starts to climb up, it'll turn the cooler on, and then you see the cabinet temperature starts to drop down, and that target is below your keg temp. So ever so slightly below your keg temperature, so it gets it slightly colder. So your best time to get a beer out of your PerfectDraft Pro machine, if you like cold beer, is always at the end of that cooling cycle, because if you think as soon as the fans turn off, it starts to warm up. So if you just manage to fluke it, so if you sat in the same room as it, when that turns off the fan, that's when it's going to be at its coldest. And then it obviously gets a bit warmer, turns down again, and it takes a while. You can see that first cycle took from nearly midnight until 3:30 AM. So it was quite a wide cycle you got there. The cooling was on for nearly 3 hours at that point to keep it down to 3, and then it goes through different waves. One of the sort of trials I did in the firmware was short, sharp, keep it cold, drop it off, keep it cold, drop it off every half an hour or so. And then other times it kind of makes that window a bit bigger, so it might turn the cooler on for an hour, turn it off for an hour, and they're just trying to work out what works best for everyone's setups. It might be that you can tweak it in the app at some point. It's, who knows, might be on the roadmap, might not be on the roadmap. There's loads of good stuff it could do. Things like if it detects the loss of pressure in your keg, because that's one of the stats that's registered, it could then send you an alert. It doesn't do it at the minute, but it could just pop your little alert out to say, look, you've got a keg that's leaking temperature. Either the top's not on properly, or there's damage, or you've got a damaged tap, like the big O-ring or something like that. There's loads of clever stuff they can do now. They're getting all this data, and as they're starting to collate it all together from lots of different users, they can start to mine that, and then that means we're going to get more efficiencies and it's going to get better. So it's quite a good time to be a PerfectDraft user, to be fair. There's lots of new stuff coming. The beers coming out thick and fast this year. I've never known a year like it, to be honest. We've had loads of new kegs. We've got quite a few kegs been retired, loads of new kegs coming out. So yeah, it's a good old time to be in that ecosystem, to be fair. I don't think we've seen the power usage yet, have we? So if I flick over to that window, you can sort of see briefly there, this is the power usage registered from the PerfectDraft Pro machine. So this bit here, I'm assuming you can see my mouse whizzing around the screen. I don't actually know. So let's have a look. So if I go on to this one, you can sort of see there 1.1 kilowatt. So this was a target temp of 6 Celsius, 1.2 kilowatts, 1.0 kilowatts. So you're literally averaging about 1.1 kilowatts, and then it must have got warm those 2 days, and suddenly I was using 1.25 kilowatts per day. So it was the power usage went up a bit. It does seem like the PerfectDraft Pro will use more power than the old Philips machine, so always bear that in mind. 'Cause I know some of you like to have more than one machine, you're greedy. So just bear in mind that the more you add of these, it's going to cost more to run, for example, 2 PerfectDraft Pros than it is to run 2 Philips machines. And it's going to cost more to run 2 Philips machines than it is to run 2 blades, because that's more efficient. But at the end of the day, it's all down to choice, isn't it? So just bear that in mind. Greta Thunberg could have a shit fit if she knew how much power was being wasted each day cooling a keg of beer. But then again, she has a shit fit about most things, to be fair. And probably for the kids, it's probably for the best, isn't it, really? So yeah, that's the power usage. You can see today, this is where I put the keg in yesterday. It used a kilowatt straight away at 3 Celsius. So I'm guessing we're already at, let me just refresh that page. Let's have a look. So today's consumption, we are up to what? We're already up to 1.1 kilowatts today, and it's what, 3 o'clock, so that's probably going to use about 1.5 kilowatts. And I've got to admit, I think the PerfectDraft, the Philips one, was about 0.8 kilowatts per day. I've got to admit, it has been a while since I've had one. I sold mine at Christmas last year, so I sold that one off. The 3620 from memory used a little bit more power than the 3720 did, so I've got to admit, maybe that's more on par with this, but you might notice it. Some people don't really care about power usage, but as the price per unit is shooting up this year, it's going up again in a few months, I think some people might start to take a little bit more notice about that sort of thing. So we'll see what happens, eh? But yes, that gives you an idea of the power usage. You've seen the graph showing the temperature, so that's taking from 140 till 1120. So 10 hours to go from room temp to 3 Celsius. It's not as quick as some people would like, but like I say, there's something showing in the data that suggests it can go quicker. The only thing is, I don't know how quick that's going to be. And to be fair, I don't think any of us are going to know how quick that's going to be until that firmware lands. So we'll see. That'll be quite interesting. I think initially when they first came out, they were tuned to cool down faster, but also be more noisier. And I've got to admit, I run mine in the home office, so it's quite nice that it is actually a little bit quieter for me. I think that's great. And it might just be you get a setting in the app, and then you just have a toggle. Do you want eco mode on, or we should call it Greta Thunberg mode? Or do you want performance mode, which is to keep your beer cold faster, or boost mode, or whatever they want to call it? We shall see. So hopefully that's given you more of an idea of what the platform's doing. Hopefully it gives you more of an idea of the time it takes to cool a temp down, the power usage and stuff like that. So we'll see. If you've got any questions, just fire away. I'll just try and answer what I can, to be honest. So happy days. Hope you enjoy a beer. It's a nice day. It's a lovely sunny day. Time for a drink. So crack on. Have a beer. And happy days. Yes. See you later. Bye bye, YouTube.